Our scripture reading this morning is from the first chapter of Luke, verses 46 through 56. Mary said, "My soul proclaims your greatness, O God, and my spirit rejoices in you, my Savior. For you have looked with favor upon your lowly servant, and from this day forward all generations will call me blessed. For you, the Almighty, have done great things for me, and holy is your name. Your mercy reaches from age to age for those who fear you. You have shown strength with your arm. You have scattered the proud in their conceit. You have deposed the mighty from their thrones and raised the lowly to high places. You have filled the hungry with good things, while you have sent the rich away empty. You have come to the aid of Israel, your servant, mindful of your mercy, the promise you made to our ancestors, to Sarah and Abraham and their descendants forever." Mary stayed with Elizabeth about 3 months and then returned home. Ancient words for our consideration.
So we'll see. Sometimes at Christmas, there's a common irony there when we think of the world. When we think of all the people that are being bullied right now, particularly in our state, where the irony of Christians celebrating Christmas and yet acting like Herod, hunting immigrant families, not letting them live, not letting them find a safe place, chasing after women who are in difficult pregnancy situations, not playing the role of the Holy Family, but of Herod, of the Romans, of the conquerors, the conquistadors. People sometimes ask, do the bullies always win? Do they always rule the world? And I think Christmas gives us two different answers. In the short run, probably the bullies usually are in charge. But in the long run, it's the lovers of humankind, it's the nurturers, it's the artists who have the gift to give the future. Nobody's going to be celebrating Herod this Christmas, or Caesar, or Pontius Pilate. The powerful, the violent, have very little to give the future. And one of the symbols that we're going to be looking at today is one of the most misunderstood, I think, in the Christian tradition, which is the virgin birth, Virgin Mother. And we're going to see a woman who, in many ways, has been disrespected by the people who worship her the most, who lift her up because of her virginity, and not for her power, the words, those prophetic words that she's saying, that she's not chosen because she doesn't have experience, she's being chosen because she's a prophet. In so many ways, the church has been the bully when it comes to gender issues. You can't really deny that. 2,000 years is a real bad record, right? And the irony is, if you look at the story, it's right there in your face. This is not about a woman submitting to men. This is about a prophet who is preaching a radical and universal love that is revolutionary. For this week, I kind of went back. I mean, I've been preaching on this kind of stuff, the virgin birth type stuff for forever. Just looking at all of the studies that I've done over the years on this. And I think one of the things that happened, the original phrase in, in Hebrew, as you I'm sure know, was maiden. It wasn't virgin. Because in the ancient world, lots of virgins got pregnant from the gods. Right? We don't really want that religion, do we? Do we want the volcano god that impregnates earth women? See, it's not less vulgar because it's our tradition. It's an abomination. Right? And we have to teach the church to stop doing that to women. Can you imagine the violence that's been done to young women? Sitting there hearing that Mary was chosen because she was a virgin. Think of the psychic damage, the violence of this male-centered view of women. So originally, the insulting part was that a peasant woman would be the person through which God would act. That was the revolutionary message. Then when the message got translated into Greek, the word there was virgin, which is a complete coincident, accident kind of thing. But Scripture people play with that. They play with the words, the language. So now they're going to play with some images from the pagan culture, using the idea of the virgin. But the idea is to give hope. Right? This is a theme in Jewish culture where nobody's too old, nobody's too young. Nobody lacks the gifts. Nobody's been disqualified because they've done something wrong. That God can act through anybody. And when we feel small and helpless, this is a really important message for us. To realize that this young woman found such courage. Think of the women in Iran who are facing such incredible violence. And think of the courage without weapons, without violence, to say no to domination. That's the spirit of Mary. Listen to these words. This is a peasant woman who's in an occupied country. She refuses to give up hope that she can make a difference in the world. Listen. God has scattered those who are proud in the thoughts of their hearts. God has brought down rulers from their thrones and has exalted those who are humble. God has filled the hungry with good things and sent the rich away empty-handed. Now let me ask you this. Is that possible? Is that world possible within capitalism? This is a radical redistribution of the goods of the world, the whole world. And a redefinition of power. So you can't reduce religion to politics, but you can't take the politics that are right here. If Christmas makes you happy, that's the message. That there could be hope for the world for everybody. That love could blossom into lives of hope for everyone if we'll redistribute the goods, if we'll reshuffle the cards. If we won't do that, we don't mean it. We don't mean that. That we want the tinsel from the Christmas story, but we don't want the heart of the story. That this is happening to the rejected people of the earth, who then become the vessel through which this sacred act happens. The stones that have been rejected by all of the authorities and all the experts become the chief cornerstone of a new temple of humankind. It's easy to despair when we look and we see Herod calling the shots. But Christmas reminds us that that's not going to get the last word. Violence is self-consuming. It may not seem that way, but ultimately the bullies turn on each other. They have no honor. They have no principles. And you're just now beginning to see that. It took a whole lot longer than I thought it was going to take. But people who will devour the weak will devour each other. And if you think that they won't devour you, it's vanity, right? People have principles or they don't. And they include everyone, or it's a domination system. So, listening to Isaiah 54, this is one of the predictions that is being played with here. Isaiah 54, sing barren woman. This is another, this is the virgin theme, but it's the theme of somebody who's maybe lost hope, who's been used by the men of her culture. Says, sing barren woman, you who never bore a child. Burst into song, shout for joy, you who are never in labor, because more are the children of the desolate woman than of her who has a husband. Do not be afraid. You will not be put to shame. Do not fear disgrace. You will not be humiliated. You will forget the shame of your youth and remember no more the reproach of your widowhood. And then the amazing phrase, for your maker is your husband. That's Isaiah. So the idea is nobody is disqualified from giving birth to the sacred in our time. And that's the message of Christmas. If we're willing to step out of the role of Herod, there's all kinds of opportunities there. Martin Luther used to be a lot more radical when he was young. And he talked like, a big game, and then talked the peasants into rising up against their masters, and then kind of backed away from it and left them out there to die. But he pointed out in his Christmas sermons are beautiful. And he talks about all of the experts, all the biblical experts, all of the political experts gathered in Jerusalem to figure out where the Messiah was going to be born. And meanwhile, Jesus is born outside of town in a cattle stall. Now, see, that's poetry, but it's political. Right? The outcasts of the world are at the center of God's heart in this poetry kind of thing. And one of the meanings of the virgin that I think would come to people's mind right away were the Vestal virgins who kept the sacred flame. These were some of the smartest women, some of the strongest women. And they didn't give up on the hope of the nation. And Mary was keeping that flame burning. She had not given up hope that someday the weak would get their day. I believe this miracle happens whenever we choose love over violence. It may seem like a really small, pointless thing, but even when you're on your own, when you make that decision to be a nurturer, a lover of humankind, and you don't match lies with lies, you don't match bullying with bullying, you do not let that into your heart, you keep Christmas in your heart, right? It may not happen in the world as a whole all the time, but we can live in that joy and that peace our entire lives. So I think there are bullies, but they don't get the last word in this story. So you have a political meaning of Christmas, but you have a cosmic thing that's happening here too. Excuse me. Sorry. See, when one person coughs, everybody else kind of. Another meaning of the virgin is Virgo, right? When you see the star stuff, when you see three strangers following a star into a new age, you see that all over the world. That's Orion, right? The belt of Orion, the three stars following Venus into a age. This is coming from Rome, and it just as well could come from a Christmas card, except for the characters are changed. This is Virgil. Now has come the last stage of the ancient song. The great line of the centuries begin anew. Now the Virgin returns. The reign of Saturn returns. Now a new generation descends from heaven on high. Only do you, pure Lucina, that's the Mary figure there, only do you, pure Lucina, smile on the birth of the child, under whom the iron brood shall at last cease, and a golden race spring up through the world. Your own Apollo is now king. Different characters, same message of a new age. Everything you're seeing in Texas, Florida, all over the United States is the death of an old system. It's dying. It's not sustainable. They wouldn't have to cheat if they had a winning hand. If you don't quit, if you keep singing the song in your heart, you can help bring this new hope, this new age. One of the themes was the birth of the Sun King. And when I went to Bethlehem, I shouldn't have been surprised, but in the little cave where Jesus is supposed to be born, they have a little crescent sun on the floor of the birth. It's on the solstice, right? So this is universal. This is not Christianity. We have a slide that I'm barely gonna, oh, that's much clearer, thank you. The first service, it was so pixelated you couldn't hardly tell. And again, this is one we've looked at, but that idea of a kind of a spiral is a symbol that we come out of the universe. And this is easier to grasp if you have a feminine idea of God. You're born out of it. If you just have a masculine idea of God, then you're made artificially. And you don't have a sense that you come from the depth of things. And you have written on your very being that pattern. That the pulse in you resonates with the pulse in nature. When you're in nature and you hear the wind in the trees, when you look at fire, when you listen to water, something deep inside of you resonates. But it's elemental, right? It's not an artificial spirit making everything. You come out of it. It's your source. It's the womb. It's the tomb. It's the cup of communion. It's the well. It's the cave. It's symbolized in so many different ways. But if you can remember who you are, where you're coming from, it can bring a peace into even hostile and painful times. So the idea of Mary giving birth, I like Eastern mystics more than Western mystics because they don't personify as much. But Meister Eckhart's pretty good. He says, we're all meant to be mothers of God, for God is always needing to be born. So the idea is that this sacred comes through us. We don't find it in finished product somewhere. We open ourselves to it. And faith is not holding on to belief. It's trusting life working within you enough to be transformed, to give your gift to the world. There's also a Sufi, one of my favorite Sufis, Hazrat Inayat Khan, who says, love is the divine mother's arms. When those arms are spread, every soul falls into them. Now, it doesn't seem as powerful to be vulnerable, and yet it is. When you think of the grass that breaks through the sidewalk, grass is very tender. Wind is very tender, and yet it overcomes the hard. Water does. The soft overcomes the hard over time. That being vulnerable, feeling, loving, caring may make you feel more at risk. But over the long story, that's the power. Nobody remembers much about the pharaohs. What we see are the artists, right? The statues, the buildings. Pharaoh didn't build any of that stuff. mean, all you have are the syllables of their name. That's about all we know about them. So when we ask the question, will bullies always rule the world? I think we can build oases. And there are times, there's certainly progress in we look at human history. But the church is on the wrong side, has been for a long time, on social justice issues. And all we have to do is listen to the woman that we call the mother of Jesus to realize that we're not being called to tradition, we're being called to revolution. And it's a loving revolution, but it's a radical revolution, and it's a universal revolution, and it's a hope for all beings everywhere. The key to Christmas is experiencing it now. Something is being born through you. Something sacred is trying to be born right now through you. And when you say yes to it, you don't have to figure out all of the pieces of it. When you choose kindness over domination, even though you see no chance of success, you redefine the world. And that's the core message of Christmas, that every one of us can give birth to this. So to have trust in yourself, or if you don't trust yourself, to trust the sacred within you, that the sacred is longing to be born through you. And there's nothing you could have done to disqualify you. That you're missing no credentials. It simply doesn't matter. The world needs that love to be made manifest. If I were to summarize what we've said today, or what one of us has said today, we do not seek the sacred outside of ourselves. We do not have to seek the sacred outside of ourselves. It is trying to be born through us. We do not have to wait for the permission of the authorities to follow the star to a new age of justice for all. We do not have to wait for the world to change before it can be Christmas in our hearts. Mary was a virgin mother because her love was so radical and universal that it envisioned and embodied a new age of justice for everyone. It was a lesson her son would learn and teach very well. Let me give the last word back to Master Eckhart. We are all meant to be mothers of God, for God is always needing to be born. Well, that's how I understand these words. We take a moment now for you to think how you would have preached these words.